In the Arkham series, whenever you see the blue spike symbol, you press the counter button to interrupt the enemy's attack with your own attack. In Gotham Knights, whenever you see the white spike symbol, you press the dodge button to do a perfect evade. Then you can optionally follow up with a knockdown counterattack. In Arkham, each attack or counter has a context-based animation that builds a combo of unlimited length. If you time attacks and counters well, you do more damage. In Gotham Knights, combos are fixed-length strings of attacks with predictable animations. If you time attacks well, you do more damage, but also the attack animations become significantly flashier. So if you are more skilled, your character looks more skilled. By ending a string of light attacks with a heavy attack, you get special combos with different effects. Some combo strings knock enemies down, some knock enemies back, some do heavy damage, some have a wide area of effect. In Arkham, attacks and counters build a single combo meter that you can cash out for a special attack like an instant takedown of one enemy, or battering takedown of multiple knockdown enemies. As soon as you drop your combo by missing the window for the next attack or counter, or getting hit, the combo meter is lost. In Gotham Knights, attacks and perfect evades build a multi-bar meter that never expires. You can cash out 1 to 2 bars at a time to do special moves. Each character also has a special area attack that requires no meter, but has a long cooldown. In Arkham, special enemy types require special counters. Enemies with stun batons must be vaulted over and attacked from behind. Shield carriers require an aerial attack. Large enemies require a beatdown. Blade wielders can be interrupted with a cape stun, or a special dodge takedown. Specific counters allow for smart auto-targeting. For example, a grapple will hit an electrified enemy, and a battering will hit a charging enemy, even if they're not the closest enemy to you. In Gotham Knights, different enemy types have multiple counters. For example, shield carriers can have their guard broken with either a heavy attack, a perfect attack, or a special guard breaking attack, but you can also just shoot around their shield with ranged attacks or attack them from behind. Since all these attacks are highly effective against non-shielded enemies too, these attacks don't auto-target shielded enemies. Instead, attacks in Gotham Knights are based on positioning in hitboxes. If you want to hit a particular enemy, you have to position yourself so that they're the closest to you. And with the correct positioning, you can collateral some attacks, hitting multiple enemies simultaneously. You can use ordinary movement, like dodges and slides, to cover large distances quickly. But certain metered special moves also move while you attack, like Robin's Warp Hit and Evade Decoy, and Nightwing's Trampoline Pounce. Also, Batgirl has a grapple like the Arkham series Batman, but while it's a good counter to shooters, it's mostly for bringing distant enemies closer or for grappling to large enemies. In Gotham Knights, movement and positioning is your responsibility. In the Arkham series, you only have to move to avoid the occasional special enemy or thrown body. Normally, there's no need to evade, and attacking just auto-leaps you to the nearest relevant enemy, so your focus is solely on selecting your next attack. In the Arkham series, red spikes indicate attacks that can't be countered, but can be interrupted, typically using a batarang. In Gotham Knights, red spikes indicate attacks that can only be interrupted by special piercing attacks. Batgirl's upgraded beatdown qualifies, but unlike the Arkham Batman beatdown, it works on any enemy, not just large enemies. If you don't have meter for a piercing attack, you must evade, but you can do an evade counter with proper timing. In the Arkham series only, enemies can pick up weapons dropped by other enemies. So you can spend the combo meter to destroy weapons to prevent this. Grappling will snatch guns from enemies, and though Batman normally fights with his fists, he can briefly borrow an enemy melee weapon. In Gotham Knights, enemies can be grabbed. You can grab unaware enemies, knock down enemies, and stunned or frozen enemies. Once grabbed, you can either perform a grab strike that quickly defeats most enemies, or perform a throw. Throws can induce stuns, which allows the stunned enemy to be re-grabbed. You can also throw enemies off some ledges. Red Hood can even grab large enemies. Arkham Knight lets you throw as a counter, but it doesn't work at ledges. Knockdown enemies in the Arkham series are technically vulnerable to a ground takedown, but there usually isn't time to pull one off during a brawl. The Arkham series lets you apply one of 3 elemental effects with ranged gadgets. In Arkham Knight, these can be supercharged into area attacks by spending the combo meter. In Gotham Knights, each character can equip 1 elemental ranged weapon and 1 elemental melee weapon. There are 5 element types, and you should choose which 2 elements you want to equip based on the elemental weakness of the enemy type you plan on fighting. Metered attacks inherit the elements of the equipped weapons, producing elemental area effects. In both the Arkham series and Gotham Knights, basic stealth involves silent takedowns and grappling between vantage points. Gotham Knights Robin has the ability to perform silent takedowns even on large enemies. From a high vantage, Arkham lets you perform a glide kick and ground takedown for a quick and noisy option. Similarly, Gotham Knights lets you down an enemy with an aerial attack, then grab them for a takedown strike. Arkham has contextual takedowns for advantage or ledge. In Gotham Knights, only Robin can do the inverted takedown, and ledge takedowns are murders. Arkham's Batman can perform explosive takedowns by hacking devices or placing explosive gel or proximity mines. In Gotham Knights, only Batgirl can overload devices. Only Robin can plant proximity mines, but of any element type, even placing one automatically during an inverted takedown. But any character can use ranged attacks on electrical panels or elemental explosive barrels to get similar effects. Arkham's Batman can also sabotage things like weapons and drones. Gotham Knights Batgirl has a similar ability with a more immediate effect. In the Arkham series, Batman can use vents to get under enemies for a special vent takedown, and interior walls allow additional takedowns while preventing Batman from ever being in the enemy line of sight. Only Robin, with his literal invisibility cloak, can position himself as easily as Arkham's Batman, because in Gotham Knights, human-sized floor vents don't exist. Outdoors, Arkham Knight's Batman can transition from a ledge grapple into an ambush takedown. But in Gotham Knights, all characters can do ambush and silent takedowns directly from their aerial traversal. So stealth takedowns are actually easier outdoors, especially with Robin's precise teleport movement. In the Arkham series, you can lure enemies to specific positions with noise, or in Arkham Knight with the voice synthesizer. Sound works the same way in Gotham Knights. Additionally, Batgirl can draw enemy attention by hacking panels to make their cover fall off, but the game also has a visibility mechanic, which means you can draw a single enemy away from a group by just loitering in an enemy's line of sight. In the Arkham series, if you get spotted in a stealth section, you must re-enter stealth quickly by breaking line of sight. Enemies in stealth sections are heavily armed and aggressive, so head-on engagement is unwise. You can contextually drop smoke when fired upon, or deploy smoke manually to disorient enemies and aid in escape. In Gotham Knights, you can drop smoke while grappling to quickly break line of sight. Silent takedowns are disabled until you hide for a while, so it's usually easier to abandon stealth for head-on combat if you get spotted. Robin drops smoke automatically after an aerial attack, allowing him to quickly down multiple enemies while remaining unseen. Arkham also has contextual smashdown ceiling takedowns, and in Arkham Knight, multiple enemies can be downed with a cinematic fear takedown. In Gotham Knights, fear is a per-enemy status effect that causes enemies to stumble to the ground and become grabbable. Batgirl's ambush takedown induces fear, reliably allowing you to eliminate 2 enemies from any group almost immediately. Enemies that become particularly afraid will simply run away from the fight. All characters have specific fear-inducing attacks, and in large groups you can cause several enemies to spontaneously leave the battlefield in fear, and many more to repeatedly fall and open themselves up to grabs. Gotham Knights borrows a lot of concepts from the Arkham series. Essentially, Batman's advanced brawl moves and hacking tools have been given to Batgirl, and his advanced stealth moves and mines have been given to Robin. Meanwhile, Red Hood has a unique focus on gunplay, and Nightwing has a unique focus on being extremely good looking. But despite the parallels, Gotham Knights plays very differently overall. Given the popularity of Arkham's rhythm-based combat system, many people are confused as to why Gotham Knights decided to use an action RPG system instead. And I think the answer is that Gotham Knights chose to support 2-player co-op and 4-player multiplayer, and it's not easy to make a rhythm-based combat system work for multiple players. Arkham combat is all about keeping tempo and playing the next note in the song, so to speak, with one enemy, one note, transitioning seamlessly into the next. If you introduce a second player, then suddenly you have 2 rhythms, which ruins the flow, especially whenever a player drops their combo. Multiplayer is also, I think, why Gotham Knights makes little distinction between brawl and stealth sections. It would be very frustrating if a mistake made by one player caused all players to fail a stealth segment, so instead you can always abandon stealth for direct engagement. But let's focus in on the combat experience of the individual player. In Gotham Knights, you can defeat nearly every enemy in the game by first doing a perfect evade counter to open them up, and then spamming the melee attack button until they're knocked out. Learning the advanced combat mechanics makes the game significantly easier and more interesting, but just a few moves will get you through the entire game. In the Arkham series, there are several special enemy types that can only be defeated with special counters, so there's a larger set of moves you must learn to succeed. However, while there are many moves and options beyond the required ones, they're mostly more trouble than they're worth, requiring a lot of planning, setup, patience, and special button sequences for only slightly better results. The advanced mechanics exist to add stylistic variety to combat for players that have mastered the fundamentals, but for players who don't want to use them, combat still looks and feels great. In Gotham Knights, the timing windows for evades and precise strikes are significantly stricter than for Arkham's critical strikes and counters, which means an inexperienced player will get hit more often and do less damage than a comparable player in the Arkham series. Since your meter also builds more slowly when you button mash, it's also harder for a new player to do special attacks, reducing the amount of variety in encounters. This difficulty is compounded by the fact that in Gotham Knights, player attacks have slower startup animations and fewer invincibility frames. It's very easy to have metered attacks get interrupted, causing you to waste a bar, and you always expect to take some damage even if you do nothing wrong. Also, enemy attacks can stun the player for much longer than in Arkham. Making minor mistakes can lead to major frustration. Once again, the multiplayer features of Gotham Knights explain these choices well. Because your attacks are easily interrupted, a teammate can meaningfully create a distraction or an opening. Because special attacks make you vulnerable, your teammates can meaningfully protect you while you do them. Because you can get stunned, a teammate can meaningfully save you from dying. Other players make the combat less frustrating and more fun, but this means as a single-player experience, all special attacks become risk-reward calculations. More powerful attacks have more startup and recovery frames, forcing you to consider whether you have enough time to safely pull them off. And both player and enemy attacks have limited range, forcing you to be precise about movement and spacing to avoid whiffing or getting hit. Considerations like these are more commonly found in fighting games like Mortal Kombat and Injustice. Action games are usually more forgiving, but since Gotham Knights grants you a generous amount of health, you can easily survive most mistakes in timing or position. So although the combat system is more skill-based, the game remains very easy, and I think this gives players little incentive to master the combat system. You don't have to understand the combat mechanics at all to complete the game, which means the typical player finds the enemies spongy and the combat repetitive and frustrating. So, while the Gotham Knights combat system is actually fairly well designed and features nearly all the same attacks as the combat of the Arkham series, the system is very poorly taught through the game design. Arkham combat is easy to learn, difficult to master, and has a cinematic quality. Gotham Knights combat doesn't need to be learned, is impossible to master, and has extremely beautiful but disjointed animations. Gotham Knights combat makes you feel exactly as skilled or unskilled as you actually are. Arkham combat makes you feel like Batman.